There's
And then
something
we end up doing,
about like the expectations that we have as a society that children should be good.
yeah,
And
good mean, nice and
that,
still.
that kind of, oh, you should be able to go out and take your child for a meal and
Yeah,
sit nicely at the table and eat properly.
yeah,
And I've been out and seen a child supposedly eating nicely and then realized that's because there's a phone there.
yes,
And
yeah.
my daughter, she's the kind of child, she's not that food focused anyway, unless it's a custard cream
Mm.
biscuit. Um,
Hmm.
like she's the kind of child that you shovel something in her mouth and then she runs off and comes back and you shovel some more in and
Yeah, yeah,
that would be her default way of being at the moment.
yeah,
She's two.
yeah,
Um, but the message that you get from everyone is, well, she should be sitting nicely at the table.
yeah,
She
yeah,
should be in a high chair. If
absolutely.
she can't sit nicely at the table, she should be in a high chair. But
Yeah,
actually, that's not natural.
no,
And then the
no.
message is, yeah, but it's not about being natural, it's about fitting into society.
Yeah, yeah, you should be teaching your child those things. She's going to have to learn how to sit still. Well, yes, but not at two. She's got plenty more years to do that. But yes, absolutely. Society's messages are all about, you know, the easy thing for us as adults is when you have a child who will sit, who'll be quiet, who will do what they're told. And that is not natural development for our young children. Yes, I mean, I'm not definitely not saying we don't teach our child certain ways of being. We do, but if we don't understand that at two, they are so far off that kind of skill and that the level of attention and stillness in their body and all of those kind of things, their body is developing. Most 2 year olds don't really control their movements. They are controlled by what their body needs. So to make them sit still is very unrealistic. And it leads to so much difficulty for parents who then feel the pressure of what other people are telling them, and then they force their child, and then you get all of that conflict with the child. It can be so destructive. And just talking a bit further about that sort of that ability to sit still. There's another reflex called the spinal galant reflex, and this is located at the base of the spine, either side of the spine. We all know when a baby is, well, this helps in birth, this helps movement down the birth canal. But, when you touch a baby at the bottom of their spine, their whole kind of body wriggles like this, arms and legs go up. So it's a really important reflex. It should integrate within a few months. If that reflex doesn't integrate and there's still a lot of response to touch at the base of the spine, you will have a child who will really struggle to sit on a seat because every time the base of their spine touches the back of the seat, that is stimulating that response. So they'll be moving, their whole body will be wriggling and moving. So when you have children in school or wherever they are and they literally cannot sit still on the seat, we immediately go to, oh, they can't pay attention very well. Oh, is it ADHD or is there something else going there? Now, I mean, I have a diagnosis of ADHD. My son's ADHD and autistic. I'm definitely not against diagnosis or, neurodivergence. I'm very much in favor of that. But I think it's going back to, okay, hold on, but what could this be? As well as they could be ADHD, but they could also have a retained spinal galant reflex. If we can sort out the spinal galant reflex, doesn't mean they're not going to be ADHD anymore, but it might mean they find it easier to sit on a chair and pay attention. And that then helps them and supports their development of skills and their journey through skills, through school. That spinal galant reflex can also be if you have a child who wets the bed much longer than you would expect. And I sometimes hear parents say, yeah, but they toilet trained really easily, but now they're 7 and they're still wetting the bed. Well, it could be the spinal galant reflex because the child may be fast asleep, and when they turn over and the duvet or their pajamas touch the base of the spine there, that part of the spine is linked to the bladder. And so it could make the bladder release at that point in time. So there are so many reasons, not just to gloss over what could actually be at the root of these problems. And I think understanding primitive reflexes is absolutely vital, because if we can check for those and we can do the simple rhythmic movements to integrate them, then at least we've ruled those things out. If there's still difficulties, then we can support those difficulties further, but at least we're not kind of supporting up here, and actually beneath that is a whole lot of other sort of things going on.
So I've kind of got two questions in one now. I want to know what what is it that you actually do to help people? And is there anything that you do specifically with adults who like so for instance, if you're working with someone who's anxious
Yeah.
and you suspect there could be something going on
Mm.
reflex wise, what
Yeah.
would you, because I mean there's so much in the body,
Yeah.
we are embodied creatures and we think that everything's up here.
Yeah.
We
Absolutely.
true. So
Yeah.
what could you
And the
do?
more anxious we get, the more we go up there, don't we? The more we disconnect from everything that's going on in our body, because those feelings can be uncomfortable. But yeah, the sort of way of working with it through the rhythmic movements, and there's various kind of neurodevelopment programs that do different things. There's various specific exercises. The one that I trained in is rhythmic movement, and it's very simple movements that you initially do for the person. So it's that passive movement, and then help them to begin to do actively, so that you're getting more of their brain on board. It's not just being done to them. And you help them to do these movements. The key is very little, very slowly, very rhythmically, and very specifically. So these are not massive, big movements. They are really small movements that you would probably look at somebody doing and go, how on earth can that help make connections between the body and the brain? But really, what you're thinking about is you're going back to the movements that the baby would make, and you're going back to that, how we would rock a baby. We wouldn't do a massive, big movement. We would do a really small movement when we're rocking them, or when we're bouncing them and patting them on the back. It's really small, it's repetitive, it's calming. All of these movements would be calming. None of them are ever meant to, definitely not anything to do with no pain, no gain here. This should feel good. It should feel calming. And what will happen slowly is that the brain and body will make new connections. The brain begins to understand what's happening in the body. It all feeds into, I don't know if you've heard of the vestibular system and the proprioceptive system.
Better
They
pro-
are, yeah, proprioception is, that's how we feel our body in space, how we know where we finish and the rest of the world begins. When I say wiggle your left toes, you don't have to look down and find your left toes. You can just wiggle them. Your brain knows where your left toes are. Um, and vestibular is all about balance. So we intuitively know in our body when our head is upright, or when we're swinging over to one side, or when we're upside down. All of those things are really important for our brain and our body to feel safe in the environment. If we don't have a good sense of balance, we're going to feel continually out of sorts, and we're not going to feel safe. If we don't understand where our body ends and what it feels like in our body, we're going to have that same feeling. So those movements feed into the vestibular system, develop our sense of balance. They feed into our proprioceptive system, help us understand more about our body. And that patterning between the brain and the body is essential. So even when we do rhythmic movements with adults, it's the same movements. It's those same small, repetitive rhythmic movements that help those connections to be formed. It takes longer with adults because there's been more time for the body to make adjustments and develop coping mechanisms and, do different ways. You may not have an adult who has a retained primitive spinal galant reflex. They may not wet the bed, and they may not be able to sit on a chair because their body has learned coping mechanisms. So what you might have is you might have an adult where all the muscles around the base of the spine are very tight and very flexed, which can then, impact digestion and things like that, because that body has had to learn to control the movement in that part of it, at the base of the spine, and it's developed a coping mechanism. So doing the reflexes with adults can be more difficult, but it's absolutely possible because the brain
Could
is
it
always learning.
could it link to things like Crohn's then?
Absolutely. Spastic colitis, that kind of thing, where we know that, the digestion, and really we're understanding more about how the digestion influences everything in our body, our immune system, our mental health, so many messages coming up from that part of our body to everywhere else and to our brain. So it has a huge impact.